Good morning. Thank you for coming to the meeting today. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Next item on the agenda is technology acquisition request.
I'm sorry. Hi, this is Jay Parker. I'm Chief Technology Officer for the district. You'll notice on the cover sheets that I gave you in 2016-17, we had capital improvement plan for technology services, included a $1.2 million request. And that was for various projects with our networks and Juniper Upgrades and our data center networks. And part of that is we were able to realize a $400,000 savings just by fluctuations of technology, negotiations of cost. So we're good stewards of the money that we were able to save that much in our estimates of the projects. And we want to turn that money around and apply it toward future requested projects, which we've listed down here. So the schools that we would put them in is Waxhaw Elementary, Forest Hills High School, Piedmont High, Monroe High, Parkwood High, and Sun Valley High. We would take the $400,000 and attached in this packet are details of how we would spend that money. So there's not a request for future money. It's just reusing some of the money that we were able to save and flex that towards our future projects. So we wanted to show you where those would come from and where they would be.
Okay, I'm sorry. Where are the, did I not photocopy the quotes or was that in that email?
I have them. I'll give them to you.
Okay.
So Jay, can you tell us a little bit about what exactly the Juniper Upgrades
Yes.
would be?
What happens currently is we have a product called Cisco that manages our switches and servers. And the Cisco, looking at the return on investment, looking at availability and the usage of our electronics, we found that Juniper was a better solution for us and a cheaper solution. So we're converting, and which has been a project over the last year, all of our Cisco switches and networks over to a Juniper network, and it includes some new ports, which ports are the way you connect the computers in the school to one device so that it can get to the internet. So we update all of our ports to a faster speed so that now when students connect or when devices connect to the internet, they get a faster speed at a lower cost. And it's the same, the student gets a better experience from our inside our schools, but it also improves our service to our community and our staff also. So I've got details on every cost, which I can provide you for every school. And it just breaks it out that these are part of our upgrades of 6-year-old Cisco switches. We're moving now to Juniper switches, which will last for 6 to 8 years again in the future. So we're planning in the future how we're going to upgrade them and bring them up to the current technology.
So these are purchases, correct?
Yes, they are purchases.
And I'm assuming our wireless router, or I'm sorry, our wireless, I'm sorry, access points are connected to these.
They are connected to everything in the school goes back through one switch in the school. And we have Aruba 325s or access points. That's the model. And those allow 60 to 70 connections per access point. So in a classroom, we would at least have 1 to 2 because you never know when there's going to be more students in there than 30. And we have enough capability in our schools now to handle the one-to-one network. With the new Chromebooks proposed for next year, we should be, that will upgrade our platform and give us better sustainability and in the future too.
And I'm assuming those, was it 325s that you mentioned?
Yes, they're 325s.
Adequate to, so basically it sounds like we're up in the horsepower a little bit, right?
We are. The past connections, the past connections were 30 to 35. So now we've moved up in our connections per device. And there's also what in technology we call a fault tolerant. So if one of the access points, happens to, quit working or just become disconnected, everything faults over and the other access points will cover that area. So it's a nice feature to have that you have an expanded mesh in a classroom or a hallway to cover. If one of them goes out, there's no disruption to instruction.
How many schools currently have converted to Juniper?
We have
Not including the ones listed here.
We have 32 schools converted over right now, and we're proposing to do the rest of these next year. And as we work our way through the district, we want them all to be over, and that's a 3-year plan of refresh. The switches that are currently in there now are working. They're functional. They're like an old car. They're starting to show some signs of age and some signs of repair and reliability. So we want to have a newer one.
So those are more like 100 meg connection versus you're probably going full gig.
They are.
Switches. Okay.
You're correct, Mr. Helms, that it's 100 meg connections, and we're moving to a gig connections on each one of these. Every one of our schools has a gig pipeline connection coming out, and some of these switches are not capable of flexing that much bandwidth. So we're moving up now to give them more bandwidth into our internet.
Okay. Now, what's the warranty period on the new switches?
5 years.
5 years. Okay. We're buying any maintenance with that also?
We did. It's included in the cost with this 400,000. So we've got our warranty. We've got our installations in there, taxes and all. And we would be requesting this for capital funds in the future. We're just now realizing some of the savings that we've had in the past to take up for those so that we can be good stewards.
Okay. And did you say we are upgrading access points at the same time?
We are.
Okay.
We're upgrading access points all across the district. Anytime we find the older ones and we have available funds, we want to upgrade those. And because, if you look at it, Union County Schools is a forefront for technology. We have probably one of the best networks infrastructure in the state, and from a technology standpoint, the students have a great experience that they can connect anywhere in the school or around our school, and the devices that we give them are 5 years or less. So we try to keep those devices refreshed and keep them current so the students, it doesn't impact instruction, improve test scores, and give them availability to online tools.
So Jay, this request is for 5 of our high schools.
It is.
Do the other 6 high schools already have it, or is that future plans?
Yes, the other 6 high schools have those. The ones that are left remaining are a few. There's 2 or 3 middle schools and some elementary schools that are left that we have not fully converted. But we're trying to make sure all the high schools get over, and knowing that we've got a bond project and we're knowing that there's a lot of construction going on, a lot of this, we're looking in the future to wireless everything. So that way, no matter what happens in a school, we're able to move it. And the DMARC is what we call the coming into the school where that switch is, where the internet comes in. The DMARCs we're putting in strategic locations so they're not impacted by the bonds or construction, so we don't have to pay for it again.
Yeah, because the primary one I noticed is Sun Valley. So, and so with this request, that would bring us to 38 out of our 53 schools that would have Juniper.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And with this request, it would complete all 11 high schools.
Yes, it would.
Okay. Thank you.
And just so I'm clear, you're looking to spend the funding this year, the
Yes.
400, to purchase or actually do the install?
Purchase and install.
Okay.
We would like to take our savings from past work and negotiations and to be good stewards. And instead of asking for more, we just want to use that same amount that was allotted to us to complete more work than what we had estimated to begin with.
Is this for information, or do you actually need
Need to go to county commission at all for funding flexibility?
I believe because it's this budget and it's within the same category, I do not believe we have to go. If we were requesting it for something other
It's
than
the same
technology,
fund,
I think we would
yeah.
have to ask to move it. Michelle, is
I think
that
that's
your
correct.
understanding
Yeah.
also?
But I think you need a motion to forward this to the full board for
Right.
approval.
So, this was, the remaining schools were in the budget for next year?
Yes, we have that in the
Okay.
capital funds budget for next year.
Okay. And the funding that's gonna be left over from that, what are we looking to do with?
If there's available funding left over from that, we'll apply it toward any future refresher projects that we have in the district.
So will we see that when the budget gets proposed to us? Will we actually
Yes.
see the?
You will
so
see the
this was
capital
planned
request
with the
for that.
reduction?
Yes, you will.
So that leaves 15 schools.
Yes, ma'am.
And do you propose or anticipate putting all 15 on next year's budget? the 18, 19?
I was going, on our refresh plan, I would do half next year and then follow the other half the following year.
Okay.
The switches are working, and in places where we have a good infrastructure, I would propose to do half and half and bring them up.
That's fair. With approval from this committee and then the board next week, what's the scope of work here? What's the time frame to get this complete before EOGs and EOCs? Is that possible?
It could be. I would say, though, it would probably be at least 90 days to 120 days to get it done.
Equipment in.
Because we have not ordered the equipment. And once it's ordered and come in, we have to schedule crews, wiring crews to come in and help us remove the devices, put in new devices, and then connect those back. And I don't want to disrupt instruction.
So is your team doing the labor, or is that part of the contract that the vendor's doing the labor?
Our team does about 80% of the labor. The small percentage that we have are when we have to dig fiber from one place to another.
Perfect.
We have to pull cables in a building across the ceiling to another side. Those are the parts we can't do.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this item? All right. Need a motion for
Make a motion to approve and send to the full board.
Okay, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, next item on the agenda is a technology update. Jay again.
Yes. Thank you. I just wanted to bring back a roadmap that I presented earlier in the year and give you an update of where we are with various technology projects. Just so you can see where the district is and how much has been completed and what needs to be done from here on. You can look at the roadmap. It goes from June to August. And we started out with our iPad minis. We put those in the schools, and we distributed those out. Those now have been done and complete. The Lenovo L570 admin refresh that you approved last year, the 3,200 computers, 500 desktop monitors, and 500 docking stations, those are all complete too. We have those in our district. Every administrator in the school has a new device. We put new monitors in the offices, and teachers have at least one computer. If there was a need, they would come to us and ask for the second one. But so far, all of them have them, and we're in a one-to-one with our administrators. So that's a thank you from the staff to the board. I hear the comments coming back from our schools that they really appreciate a newer device. Theirs was 6 years old. They were starting to have problems with them. This will help improve instruction and services in our schools. So that's a thank you back. I'm just echoing what their comments.
Yeah, I just will add to this. We've heard a lot of tremendous positive feedback from teachers and principals. So I just want to echo Jay and say thank you to the board for your support on that.
So the iPad 5th generations, or 700 of them that we purchased at the beginning of the year, those have been distributed in schools. I've done a couple of analysis checks on some schools and the performance that they're using them for. The only request we get from that is they want more. And the kids love them in the mornings. If you go into any kindergarten classroom, first grade, second grade, and look on the desk, you'll see them early in the mornings using the devices. But, with the ratio that we distributed those, the teachers now have some fluency on how to use them for instruction. The students are streaming everything, and they like the touch capability of the iPads. And we expect to get 5-6 years out of these easily. So the only request I hear is they would love to have more of them in the future. The single sign-on, we partnered with Clever at the beginning of the school year. And we used that as one point of entry with the username and password for our students and staff to get to applications that we host locally here in Union County. Part of those are like Dreambox. Naviance is one that we put in there that were our applications that we adopt locally here in the district. We've also merged that with the state single sign-on platform called Identity Access Management. And what that accomplishes for us here in Union County is when students log into the NC Ed Cloud, which is a state-hosted cloud, it allows them to get Discovery Ed, PowerSchool, Destiny, or check out our books. And now it's going to allow you to get Clever, with the same username and password. It just passes that authentication to another place. So in essence, the ultimate result of this is students have one place to use one username and password to get to the devices from school or home. So we're slowly incorporating more of, we will bring Mayan in coming up in the future. The iReady's the next one that we will put in there. Also, we want to put Destiny in for our staff, and that'll come up too. And you can see that'll occur in April and May as we get to that. What's highlighted in red is where we're headed. The Lightspeed to Zscaler internet filtering. Our assessment at the beginning of the year was we used the Lightspeed internet filter, and that's what controls what content is shown on your computers from the internet. So these are what we load is, we call them pack files. They're just mobile software that we put on student devices. So when they leave the facilities and go home, they're still filtered with the same software. We also have another file that we install at the schools. We piloted this in early college in CATA and Walter Bickett. We've had great results. The students are taking them home. They really like it. They think the filter now is a quicker, faster connection. They're getting better performance out of it. And what we would like to do is convert over the whole district over the spring break to the Zscaler platform from Lightspeed. And where this will save us is for the district, we'll realize a $400,000 savings. What it is that filters $100,000 a year. They require a 3-year upfront service with Lightspeed. If you renew it, it expires in June. And we would need what we call a firewall switches, and that's what actually you put into its software and a hardware device that controls the internet from one central point. We can put in sites that you're allowed to go to, sites you're not allowed to go to. Those are the items that we put in, but it saves us from having to put that another expense up, and the Zscaler is hosted by the Department of Instruction. It's a free service paid for by the state, filtering service, and many other districts use it. So as far as efficiency and use of a product, it's a win for everywhere in that.
Yeah. Where does the funding come from for the current filter?
It was purchased 4 years ago, and that was the contract that they purchased it. I'm assuming out of capital funds at some point.
And if those at capital, state, or what? Do the state allow money for that? Capital? Okay.
And that's basically what we were talking about, is that will save the district money, but we get the same functionality that we've always had, but now at no cost because it's with the state of North Carolina.
Yeah, and Jay and I have talked about this, and in terms of the cost savings, you'll see this probably in our budget proposal. We would probably end up proposing to take that current funding and redirect that to other technology related services. Like, one of the big concerns that we have shared is our emergency offsite, catastrophe server. If we ever went down, what happens with all of our software backup, all this kinds of stuff. And so we need to put some resources into our, I don't know what you call it, Jay, but disaster recovery. Our network needs some backup. And so that might be an expense that we take a look at from a budget standpoint.
Thank you. Any questions on that? PowerTeacher Pro is the new gradebook that will be implemented by the state of North Carolina in 2018-19. Just when the teachers got used to their gradebook, the state has upgraded, and it is a requirement for all districts in North Carolina to move to this new gradebook for next school year. And so we started planning for this back in August. We were planning. Currently, upstairs right now, there's professional development occurring with all of our schools. We had the elementary there yesterday, middle high will be there today, and we'll go into the central office tomorrow. But we were training all of our schools on this new gradebook. We built websites for it. We built electric content to put on the pages for our teachers. And we're also going to have webinars all summer long that if anybody wants to join us, we're going to go back over the same content, because there's a point in time where our staff leave in June and don't come back until the first day of school. We want to continue to have these webinars and record them and show them and keep our staff abreast. So when school opens up, we will be prepared as a district for this. And so currently we're performing the train the trainer model, where we bring in one person from every school and make sure that they master the content and are able to go back and communicate that to their staff.
Can teachers get professional development credit hours over the summer if they take these webinars?
I don't know, but I can check on that.
Yeah, please. Yes. I would do that then. Encourage them to get their credit hours
Get the
and do
credit
these
hours.
webinars.
It's a great opportunity. I mean, to be honest, the new Gradebook is much better than the old one. It's more intuitive. It has more features in it. It allows you to capture grades and not actually record some. So if you're collecting homework and you just want a checkbox for that, but you don't want to go into the final grade, teachers have the capability now of putting a category in, saying I've collected, the student's homework. It just gives me a check mark, but not going to final grade. So it's really nice. But we'll be fully trained. We'll have our trainers trained by tomorrow, and then we go back to our schools and start the webinars. Okay. Anything on that? So the next page is a screenshot of what students have seen that have converted over at CATA Early College and Walter Bickett. What they have seen is this pop up on their screens, and it just informs the student that there's one initial authentication to the device. So that means you've got to log in with your username and password on the device one time. It'll capture that and remember it, and that's what the filter does. And part of our process is to keep this on the screens, a week before we ever make a conversion, to let students start to see that it's coming. And then once they authenticate on this one time, and this will include our staff, all of our staff will get the same pop-up screen will come up on their screen on conversion. And the difference is students are used to putting in their 10-digit student ID and it would say student.ucps.12.nc.us. They need to log in with their Active Directory, which is our account on the server for you. And that just eliminates the word student. It's just your 10-digit at UCPS.K12. And that's basically what this screenshot will give you, is guidance on how to authenticate. If you forget, just look back at the screen, how I can get in there to get on the internet. Because as soon as you click on any browser, this is what pops up the first time. That's all. Yeah. True. Just wanted you to see the email that went out about our Exchange 2016 upgrade. We are moving our email platform up from 2012 Exchange, Microsoft Exchange, to 2016. And we will do that over the Easter break. We will begin bringing up all of the accounts over to a new environment. And just wanted you to see the memo that went out, see the functionality that we get out of it. That we get a more supported platform, because 2012 Exchange has gone out of support by Microsoft. We want to move to 2016. What that allows us to do then is in the future go to Office 365 if we want to, make a quick conversion to that, but it also gives us better performance and functionality. And what I've included in this is screenshots of what it will look like. So any staff member that goes to our email will actually see a blue background when starting in April 2nd. And then you'll see the functionality coming in behind it. So I didn't want to alarm anybody about a different color or different look. It's an upgrade to our 2016. It is legit, yes.
Ours is already.
Yeah, I was like,
Yeah,
I think I've
mine's
seen this.
No, you may see some of the background starting to change now as we
Okay.
prepare for this.
April 2nd, I was like,
But your accounts, your accounts will actually convert over on April 2nd to the 6th. You'll start to move the accounts and you'll see more of these filters show up and the functionality show up in them.
So this has been tested and everything for.
Yeah, we tested. The way that technology services will implement any new platform is, if we're going to roll something out that we think is better for the district, we need a taste of our own medicine. So everybody in technology converts over first. And we experience it for 60 to 90 days to make sure that how does this work? What are the nuances of it? What tweaks do we need to make? And then we roll it out to the district so that when it does make it to our final customers, they're all, they don't have any impacts on technology. Okay. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. So I guess that wraps up the technology update. Next item on the agenda is a transportation update with Marlon.
Good morning. I don't really exactly know what updates you want. I do have a few updates that I could provide without knowing the specifics, but currently for our Here Comes the Bus app, we have about 12,600 account users, and we're tracking roughly 15,000 students on buses each day. And on a daily basis, we travel about 30,000 miles per day. Our assigned ridership as of today is 30,818 students that we have currently assigned to buses. That doesn't mean that everyone is riding. It just means that these kids have requested transportation and we have them assigned to a bus. We also have 286 buses that we currently operate on a daily basis. We started out the school year with 9 additional buses. So we have parked 9 buses between August and today, which should really help with efficiencies as well as bus driver vacancies. 9, yes, ma'am. Anytime you have buses that you could park without disrupting our daily operation, then it really helps with vacancies. So as of today, we have about 6 vacancies, but we do have surpluses in certain clusters. We have 1 vacancy in Marvin, 1 vacancy in the Sun Valley cluster, and about 4 vacancies in the Parkwood Cupperson cluster. We do have a surplus. When I say surplus, we have some subs in the Monroe cluster, the Forest Hill cluster, Piedmont, and Porter Ridge. And so the western side of the county is where we usually have difficulties getting drivers to drive that far, especially from the eastern side of the county to report to work.
Mr. Watson, I have a question. So I know back, it's probably been a few months, I had kind of given a suggestion. I understand where you're going with efficiency, that parking buses helps with, well, yeah, it helps with the efficiency formula, but I guess what I'm challenging is running more buses going to drive additional ridership? So a lot of the feedback that I get from the public is that they're not taking the bus because they have a 45-minute bus ride to go 3 miles. So a lot of that is due to, the early morning pickup times and things like that their schedule goes to prove. So I'm just curious if we have any kind of modeling that we could run that would give an assumption that we could get more ridership with keeping those buses moving and trying to bring that schedule in. Because, 45-minute bus rides to go 3 miles, I wouldn't do it as a parent, right? So I would opt to take another 30 minutes to allow my child to sleep and then drive them as, being more important. So I'm just curious if that's been given any thought, and because increasing ridership would also help the efficiency formula, I'm assuming. If you're moving more kids.
Correct. Moving more kids, less buses will help the efficiency. In some cases, even when we do double runs, the kids live very close to the school, but and it does help with efficiency. But I guess when we talk about adding more buses, you are talking about adding an operational cost of about $50,000 per bus that you add on the road. So there's 3 things that go into this equation. One is the number of buses that we currently operate, the number of kids that we currently are transporting each day, as well as expenditures. And so we have, we've looked at and actually been aggressive in parking buses. So that should help with efficiency. Also, what I'm wanting to do is look at the expenditure side, meaning, just to give you an example out, I wish I could pull it up for you, but just for instance, the state gave us about $14.1 million, okay? And then if we use or utilize all of the supplemental money from the local side, then that keeps the efficiency rating steady, okay? But if we use less of the local side funding, then the efficiency goes up slightly. And so parking buses helps with efficiency, using less of the local dollars helps with efficiency, as well as getting the ridership up. The problem that I've seen since I've been here is that we are steadily dropping in ridership. We're steadily dropping in ridership, and we're trying to park buses just to keep the efficiency rating at a level or stable percentage. So the last couple of years, we went from like a 93, now we're at a 92. And again, when I first began here in Union County, we had 315 buses on the road. Now we're at 286, but we're still staying level. And the biggest reason is because the ridership is dropping.
So again, I just challenge, with ridership being a component of the equation, can we look at the schedule and bring those times in? Because I have a very strong feeling in hearing the feedback that is going to increase ridership. I understand where you're going. You're being a little bit more reactive to, okay, ridership's down, I need to park buses to maintain or improve efficiency. But I'm challenging, like, maybe when we do the schedule next year, let's look at how do we get those 315 buses back on the road? Is that going to, bring our average travel time down to 25 minutes, where all of a sudden we're going to be filling these buses up? So,
and we can do that. I guess what I'm saying is, when we had the 315 buses, the ridership was still dropping, and yeah, it was still dropping. Meaning, it's kind of like being in a classroom or a building where you have 5,000 kids, you have 25 teachers, but then when it drops down to 1,000 kids, you have to look at cutting staff because you don't have the kids to support it. Same thing with ridership. When ridership drops, we have to look at eliminating buses.
okay, I'll just offer up. So, we're going through realignment, where the main goal is to get kids to neighborhood schools. So that in and of itself should be less miles run, right? So I just challenge to really look at the schedules and try to reduce those travel times. And I think we'll see a big increase in ridership.
Yes, sir.
And I know some of our clusters, we've heard you speak about, tier 1 bus routes and tier 2 bus routes.
Yes, ma'am.
Has anyone studied that, or have you been looking at that to see if all, going from a tier 1 or tier 2, I know like in Piedmont, you're busing middle school and high school students together. Would it be worth looking at that to see if any changes could be made to improve efficiency from that point of view? Or is it just because their bell times are so close that you kind of have to do that, but it's going to drop your efficiency?
Right. The best model is anytime you have a 3-tiered system, because you're using the same equipment to service 3 different schools. And so, but the dynamics for Parkwood, the dynamics for Piedmont, the dynamics for Forest Hill are slightly different because it's so rural, meaning you can drop off kids, elementary kids, at 7 o'clock at the school. But then when you go out into the rural areas, you don't have enough time to make it back for a high school run and then go back into the rural areas and make it back for a middle school run. And so that's why having the 2 ride together versus riding a 3-tiered system works out better. Because
so in those particular clusters, it's just a necessary.
Yes, ma'am. Only because of the distance that it takes to get to those kids.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Perfect, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Does anybody else have any more questions?
And I just want to confirm, the last report I had was that our efficiency rating right now is 91%.
It's around 91 or 92.
Okay.
I have to go back. I can pull it up before
That's
I leave.
okay.
it to you.
I thought it was 91. I just wanted to
Is
confirm
that for
with
this
you.
year? Projected?
It was-
No, the last report we received
Okay.
had dropped to 91. And I know in 2014 we were at like 99.8.
And want to say when I looked at the numbers, it was either 91.8 or close to 92. And the ridership compared to current ridership was about 4,000 students difference, 5 years ago.
So there's no more questions for Mr. Watson. We'll move on to our next item, which is the transportation routing software. And I kind of want to put this on there because with realignment, we don't have the capability to do running models or different scenarios, what the routes could look like and buses and everything. I just want to kind of get what the current system is and see what we currently have and if there's any improvements that could be made in the system, any, I guess, alternative softwares we could possibly use. So I kind of find it ridiculous we can't do any modeling at all for any different scenarios through the year.
Right.
I mean, we can, it just takes a lot of staff time to do that.
It does. It does. The current system that we use is called Edgelog, and that is mandated pretty much by the state. I think there's one other county, and Mrs. Strickland is from that county, but there's one other county that was approved to use an alternate routing software. And so with that said, I am going to that district very soon take a look at their routing software. But the current system that we use and the current process that we use prior to me arriving, you would go into the school and you would fill out a transportation request form and it would be faxed over to transportation, and then we would actually create your routes and assign your kids to a bus. As of this school year, now everything filters through PowerSchool. So if your child needs a bus or want a bus, now you have to go to the school. School verifies your ID, your address and all of the information. That information is placed in the PowerSchool. Once it's placed in the PowerSchool, we get an upstew, as we call it in the transportation world. We get an upstew overnight, and it triggers a work order for our staff to create or assign that particular child to a school bus. And so I think streamlining the process this year has really helped. I just asked staff yesterday, would they like to go back to the fax copies? They said, no way. And so I think that this is really good. And then getting the data managers to really work with us to know the importance of we're only going to be as good as the data that we get into PowerSchool. And so them recognizing the importance of it, I think this process is starting to really grab full steam, and everyone's starting to adjust to the new process. But as it stands right now, the only routing software that's out there is the one that's supplied by DPI, and that's the one that they support, the one that they give us funding for. I know that the bus planner, the one that I was speaking of in a different county, they have the routing software. From my understanding, it's very, very easy to use. It's a very good tool. And I just want to get more details like the support part of it, the customer service part of it, before we start implementing a new routing software.
Do you know what it takes, Marlon, to get permission from the state to use a different?
I don't. I think
software?
Mr. Strickland can give you a little more details, because I think he and the transportation director at that time went before the state and requested to use an alternate routing software.
Okay.
You mentioned that the drivers are now using PowerSchool to enter a lot more stuff versus, older fax methods. Mr. Parker just told us that the teachers were going to have to go to a new grading system. I think it's called PowerTeacher Pro. is that going to affect what you were saying? Is PowerSchool going away or okay? Okay, so we'll keep PowerSchool for this, but go to PowerTeacher for that.
It's all the same
Okay.
company.
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you.
And kind of walk me through too, I guess you say the information comes from PowerSchool. I guess there's an address in there that gets geocoded for the routing. And then what verification is there after that?
So
How does the address get entered in PowerSchool? Is it from the parent or is it from?
the data manager or
Okay.
the school designee.
Okay.
So some schools may have the data manager entering the information. Some schools may have another staff member entering the information. But what we look at from a transportation standpoint, we want to know if there are Ys in the transportation code or if there are Ens in the transportation code. Ens mean they don't want transportation. The Ys means that they do want transportation. And they could put a C in there for car riders, but we want to be able to code these kids correctly so that we know if they're bus riders, if they're not bus riders, if they're car riders, and even a W, if they're walkers. But we want to be able to give accurate information and have accurate information so that when requested, we can supply that information and be readily available.
Okay. And what happens when a student in the morning may ride, but not the afternoon and vice versa? Is there any delineation between?
Yes, sir. That's a good question. We have another software that's called Every Info, and any alternate addresses that we go to, that information has to be entered into Every Info, and we get those requests immediately. It doesn't take an overnight process. So if you went in today and entered a alternate address, as soon as you hit submit, we get the request, the work order, and then we complete the work order and get that student on a bus as quickly as possible.
Last question for me. Seems like every time we talk to you, we're parking more buses.
Yes, ma'am.
And I know we're about to make a change that could potentially bring our ridership up. If kids are in their neighborhood school, we might be able to gain some ridership back that would help your numbers. But going from 315 down to 386, are we in a position where we need to release some buses or sell some buses or return to the state? What's that process, and are you at that juncture yet?
That's a very good question. So some of the buses that we parked last year, every year you're due to get replacement buses if your buses are 20 years old or they have 250,000 miles. So some of the buses that we parked last year, we were not able to, the buses that are scheduled to be replaced this year, we're not able to get new buses because we're using some of the buses that we parked last year. So we had to select the buses that were parked last year, the ones that we thought were the better buses. We had to select those buses to replace the ones that are aging out or either mileaging out this year. So that's a very good question. So any buses that we parked this year could potentially be back on the road next year as a replacement bus for those that are aging out or mileaging out.
Okay, but I'm concerned that maybe we own or have too many buses. So have you run that? Do we need to get rid of some buses is my question.
Right, no ma'am. To answer your question, no ma'am. And we do have the capability of getting more buses, meaning we have credits where if let's say we get an influx of kids next year and we needed to add additional buses to the fleet, or if there was a new initiative, we could actually request from the county, not from the county, from the state, we can request our credit buses. And I think we have, I don't know the number, I know we're in the double digits, but we can request those buses if we need to.
When you park buses, are those used, are those completely parked, or do you stagger those in as replacements, like when you have a repair or maintenance on a full-time service bus?
Good question. So for those park buses, we are supposed to use our spare buses as the first option. If we don't have any spares, then we can start utilizing the park buses. But the park buses technically should be parked at least 80 something days out of the school year, meaning if it runs over 90 or 91 days, it's not considered a park bus. Yes, ma'am.
Just so I know and the public knows, currently, how long would it take to run an alternate model, I guess, transportation model, routing model for different scenarios? How long would that currently take staff?
I would say at least 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay.
And that's doing it in a different data set.
Yeah.
But don't hold me to that hard line. I mean, but
Yeah.
I'm thinking 3 to 4 weeks to run a different model.
So that's not using the routing software, or like doing it by hand? What do you mean by
That-
an alternate data set?
So the routing software that we currently have, we can use an alternate data set to run different models, but it takes some time to run those models.
Okay.
Any more questions on the routing software? All right, that was the last item on the agenda, so.
Actually, Mr. Parker apparently needs to come back. We did part A of a technology acquisition request. There's apparently a part B that didn't get taken care of. So Mr. Parker's coming back up to the table. I know, sorry.
Welcome back, Jay.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to come back and bring one item that is probably my ear more than anybody else's of putting it on the agenda. This is a proposal to buy 1,500 Chromebooks. And these are replacement Chromebooks for ones over the last 5 years. We have had them stolen or broken or damaged at 1,200 devices over the last 5 years. So what's happened is we've come up short on devices because they have not been replaced over these 5 years, and that limits our surplus and given us the ability to provide spares to schools for testing and special instruction cases. And so my proposal is to buy 1,500 new Chromebooks. You can see the cost on here of those Chromebooks. It includes the Google license, which manages the devices. And it also includes the warranty, the 4-year warranty for these. It's to replenish items that have been broken or stolen or lost or damaged over the last 5 years. So my proposal is to purchase another 1,500 of these and wanted to seek the board's approval for.
Can I make a proposal as well?
Yes, sir.
So about 30 minutes ago, we just approved $400,000 to go towards
did.
the Juniper upgrade.
Yes, sir.
Can we deflect that money to almost cover the total cost of these Chromebooks?
You can, yes, sir. You're correct. We can take that money and deflect it over here. We would still be requesting that as a capital funds request for next year, those schools.
Right.
If that would still show up in the future. We can do either one you would like with the funds.
If we held to what we previously discussed, to use the 400 for Juniper
Yes.
at those, 5 or 6 schools, including 5 high schools that clearly need the Juniper upgrade.
Yes, ma'am.
Where were you proposing that the 441 come from?
We have a fund balance that in Union County that we would use a portion of that fund balance to purchase these 1,500 Chromebooks.
Where would the other portion come from if you didn't take the full amount from fund balance? What do you mean by portion?
I'll let Mr. Covington come up and explain that.
Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
From previous discussions, you all know about the 5.7 million that was in fund balance. We would use part of those dollars to purchase the 1,500 computers.
I think you meant take a portion of.
Oh, okay. So I thought you meant
Take a portion. Yeah, that's it. Take a portion of it.
Okay, so the full amount would come from the
Yes,
from the
ma'am.
Fund balance.
Yes,
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
We would lower the fund balance and bring an appropriation to the board for approval.
And I apologize for missing the beginning of the meeting. The Chromebooks I thought was the only one on the agenda. This is probably the bigger priority than the Juniper, because this it could impact every single kid that has the need to have a replacement device. And so my recommendation would be to deflect what you all had already approved, go to these Chromebooks, and then let us make the capital request for the Juniper in the budget for next year. I've already asked the finance committee that on the 5.7 fund balance that we would propose to hold tight on that money and not spend any of it except for this purpose. And I believe the finance committee was somewhat okay with that.
So if the finance committee was okay with spending $441,000 from fund balance, then again, should we hold to our previous decision to use the $400,000 to take care of the Juniper upgrades? Or are you saying cancel this and use the $400,000 to get?
Or what I'm saying is the priority would be the Chromebooks. And so if the conversation that I've had with the finance has been, we're only going to spend the $400,000 for technology, then let's use that for the Chromebooks and take the other $400,000, delay that for a capital request for the future budget, as opposed to spending $800,000 out of fund balance.
Well, but we saved 400,000.
Yeah, we're not taking $800,000 from fund balance.
This is a cost savings. Could be a wash. So this isn't coming from fund balance.
Yeah, it's a savings that he.
Yeah,
So
40,000 would come from fund balance,
41.
I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
So either only 400,000 would come from fund balance or nothing because we had the savings of the 400. So the key is, do we do the savings for the Chromebook?
Yeah, and based on your recommendation, I'm inclined to do both, depending on what came out of finance. I don't want to override what came out of that committee, but I'm inclined to do both because the 400,000 is savings that you have realized.
It is, and you've got to think back too. That money was allocated for network upgrades in the past,
And keep it in
that same
budget
classification of network upgrades again in the future. So there's not a change in the. Yeah, there's no issue.
So I'm inclined. If it's okay with the committee, I would say let's stick with what we've already discussed for Juniper, and then take care of the testing, the spares. I think you're calling them the spares.
Yes.
Will those be allocated? Will these 1,500 devices be dispersed among the high schools, or will they stay here in technology? Where do you see those 1,500 going?
Thank you. And I think, Dr. Houlihan, it is a priority to have those devices because spares on hand when we get to testing is a critical item. And we would distribute those among the high schools and allocate enough of them at each high school to cover our end of grade testing. Because one of my biggest concerns is that we're going to show up to testing and not have enough spares. If a student's device breaks and another one breaks, that we're not having a device to put back in their hands. So this would give us enough insurance that we would have that allocation at each location.
These 1,500, confirm for me, our elementary devices, like third, fourth, fifth grade, middle school devices and high school devices, are those all the same, or do the high school students get a different device than like an elementary student?
The elementary students have newer devices and they were purchased in the past,
Okay.
last 2 years. So they've upgraded those. The 6 through 12 are a proposal at the end of the year to refresh all those 6 through 12. So in those 6 through 12, they're naturally receiving more use and wear on those because they're taken home and they're used outside the building. Where elementary, you don't get that
They
much
study.
breakage or wear and tear on them. And we, as those items, we really need those for our testing and as a spare for the future. And it will also support our schools who keep asking for more and more spares on hand to make them feel secure that they're going to make it through the testing.
So this 1,500 spare could go to elementary, middle, or high, depending on.
It could, yes, ma'am, you're correct. It could go to any of them that technically needed it. Our target right now is to put them in most of the high schools. That's our intent, is to spread them among all the high schools of spares.
And then, of course, if there was an elementary or middle in that cluster, then it could just be moved from that high school.
Yes, ma'am. It's a quick process for us to send a desktop support engineer over and pick them up and take them if we need to take them to another location.
So I have to ask some clarifying questions around the chain of events that determine this quote, we really need these 1,500 Chromebooks. So the first I heard of it was after we found the fund balance. So where was the need prior to that? And are we just spending the money because we have it? And like, what was our contingency plan for testing if the money wasn't found?
So the need prior to that was that you have a really small percentage of devices in schools as loaners. So we have been bringing engineers back into our depot, and they work if it's additional hours or time, we would bring them back in to help with repairs to get them quickly back to a school. But as school year picks up and more breakage occurs in a school, the less time our engineers are able to spend back at the depot. So the depot starts to build up a log, and they're working as hard as they can, to get those devices back to schools within 48 hours. Sometimes because of the backlog, it's 72 hours, because you're trying to get them fixed, and it takes a little bit longer. And the need came was we were so close on that, having enough spares for testing, and so close on every device and the turnaround time that margin of success was getting shorter and shorter. So when we discussed it in the past about refreshing our technology, and these devices, looking back at our inventory system, showed 1,296 devices have been, since in 5 years have been damaged, stolen, or broken, just naturally from attrition. And those devices were our spares, and now you don't have the spares. So we've cut that margin down to almost, just a small percentage of 5% or less in a school as spares. And we want to increase that, because coming into end of grade testing, I don't want to have more devices start to break and not have enough of that margin to cover it, or just barely squeak by. I wanted to ensure that we have enough devices to, not impact testing at the end of the school year.
And I'd like to add that since I've been on the board, it's been a problem with the replacement Chromebook. It's not just come up. I just think that they haven't asked. It's been an issue since 2014 with not having enough Chromebooks, with them being older. It's been an ongoing problem. I just think that they've been hesitant based on, with the whole Lenovo figuring out how and priority. So it's not something that's just come up from my 3 years.
Talk to me about the testing week, right? So we're at end of semester. So we just did that. We just had an end of semester, right? We obviously got through it with the week of testing. Yes. Well, these 1,500 are going to high school, correct?
Yes.
That was the concern?
They will. Our intent is to put them as spare units in high schools and replace those that are not as functional. We made it through the testing, but my concern and worry through that whole process is that that you can only do that so many times where you're not going to be successful.
And I know my daughter had to leave her Chromebook at the school.
Mm-hmm.
So
to charge them and keep them.
The one-to-one necessarily doesn't apply for the week of testing. Is that correct?
It's handled differently in each school. Some schools allow the students to take them home to prepare for the test. So they take them home overnight. They'll prepare for the test. Others want them to leave them at school, so they have a fully charged device. There's enough on hand. It depends on each.
Is there any,
just one night?
Is there any scrubbing that occurs to make sure there's not cheat sheets on it? That type of thing.
No, they're locked down. You can't install anything on the computer itself because it being a Chromebook, it's a minimal storage device on there. We restrict students from installing anything other than Flash. Basically you can install Flash just for streaming purposes on the internet.
So, yeah, where I'm going is if testing week, the student doesn't bring their books or their Chromebooks home, and let's say, so I have 4 classes, of which I'm taking one exam a day, but it's over a 6-day period. I'd like to know what percentage of students in any given day are actually taking an exam. I don't know that 100% of students take an exam on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
So is that 75? And could we actually put a policy in place where we take the Chromebooks at the last day of the semester before test week, and those become the pool for testing, as opposed to spending the $500,000?
I don't know. This came up to my attention in the fall semester because when the state And when we looked at our testing calendar for this time, and Dr. Jones, we need to come up here and speak to this. Typically, what based on my understanding, because you test 3rd through 12th grade on EOC, EOG. And so historically, you have a pretty broad window as to when kids are testing. And I asked, what do you do at the high school level if you have kids that are testing and their device breaks? Historically, we've taken laptops from elementary and middle school and pushed them up as quote unquote replacements. And the testing window this year, as released by the state, is a little bit tighter. It's a much tighter of a window. So the logic behind this is you may not have that flexibility to then all of a sudden take 3rd through 8th grade laptops, push them up to high school because they may be testing on the same day or the same time. And so, Jay and I talked about this earlier, and I asked him, I said, what's going to be your backup plan if we don't have funding? And
I would assume spring is a whole lot more challenging than fall.
Yes.
Yes.
And so, part of this, we had earlier discussions about a fund balance or is trying to find the funding from somewhere. If that meant cutting projects, moving money in our budgets to come back to the board. So yeah, when the fund balance conversation was happening, this was one of the initial priorities that was put on the table, and that was back before the winter break. So, I don't know if that makes any sense to you from a testing perspective, but that was really when the need hit. And then Jay is being here less than a year. He's come to realize that our spares, we have a very low percentage, and we're just trying to do something about it proactively.
I remember 2 years ago, we had to retain a lot of our tech employees, and they had to work over their entire Christmas break just to get through the backlog in the depot. And so that when the kids returned in January for testing and final exams, laptops would be ready to go. But I do remember 2 years ago, our employees having to work through Christmas break to take care of that backlog and be ready for January testing and exams and everything.
I mean, at some point, yes, we need to be definitely fiscally responsible, but we also need to realize that these kids taking exams and the stress and the switcheroo of the laptop and the, that's a whole nother level of situation of emails of my kid failed their exam because we were doing switcheroo of laptops and going from here, there, and everywhere. That just sounds like a hot mess.
So Dr. Jones, welcome, by the way.
Good morning.
Good morning. Can you speak to test week and what that looks like?
So
particularly in the high school.
So particularly in high school, of course, high school is going to come at the very end of the semester, right before the last day of the 10th. So you're looking at high school exams going all the way to the day before graduation. Mm-hmm. Before that, you're going to be testing your elementary. Of course, remember that your elementary is not all on computer. You basically have 5th grade science, but your elementary. Middle is also tested during that window as well. You do have middle school tests that are, so it's really more of a middle school and a high school issue. Your high school principals, and you can kind of jump in if I don't say this correctly. Your high school principals, they work ahead of time in setting the computers, having them ready, having the passcodes. That was one of the reasons when we were out for snow that we did not have exams when coming back, because it was more of being ready. Your principals work with technology and making sure that they have the computers, that they're staged, that you have the access codes written on cards, because you want exams to begin and that logging into the system. So high school principals, and we had some discussion with some high school principals earlier about, when they were looking at switching out computers, were we going to make sure we had enough that they would be able to work with and prepare for exams. So your high school principals and your guidance counselors have a plan that they prepare for those. But middle school and high school are not testing overall on the same days. You may have a few. For example, you have Math 1, which is in your 8th grade, as well as your high schools. So there's a separate day for Math 1 that's being tested. Or if there are any North Carolina finals as well, they're administered.
The other thing, just to clarify, when Jay says we are going to disperse the Chromebooks to high schools, what I think you mean by that is if Weddington High School gets a set number of replacements to store, that would be for the cluster. In other words, that would be where your desktop support engineers would go. And if Weddington Middle School or Weddington Elementary or Antioch or any of the other feeder schools need replacements, that's where the desktop folks would go, would start at the high school and deploy them down. So while the target would be secondary mostly, they're for the cluster.
Do you anticipate those 1,500 devices being evenly dispersed to the cluster, or will it be based on student population or percentage?
It's based on student population. So, the ones that have larger populations, because of the spare percentages, we try to keep 10 or 15% as the spares in the schools. And currently we're down to about 5%. And we still have spares and we're still getting by, but it's just that concern of not meeting that requirement one day. And that was the proposal, to purchase extra devices to cover our end of grade testing, to ensure that we have enough devices in each location.
So we got about 5% spares right now currently?
5% above the student population there.
Okay. And then what would the percentage be on this?
10 to 15%, depending on.
Plus the 5%, or?
No, sir. That would include the 5%.
Okay.
So we would go up to a 10% at a minimum. I would love to have 15%. If you're asking a technology person, we always want more. But from a reality standpoint, we want to ensure the students in grade testing is not impacted, that they don't have that shuffle, what we're talking about, or carrying devices, or just getting by with 5 extra devices in the school. I want to ensure that our testing goes off, our students have the resources they need to be successful.
And the current spares, what's the age on those?
All of our devices are 2013, or were purchased around 2013. So there's a few that have been upgraded over the years that PTAs may have purchased, or the schools may have allocated some more, or we may have gotten an insurance replacement on some that have been totally damaged. But the ones that the 1,296 of them we haven't been able to replace. And you're correct in that over the years this has occurred, and it came to my attention that we were really short on having those spares for students. So I wanted to bring that back to the board, to express the need to have that spare.
Last question for me.
Yes.
I completely understand needing to go from 5% spares to 10.
Yes, ma'am.
Maybe 15.
I would love 15.
But I want to confirm that this is not because we have a shortage of technicians at the depot. Do we have any vacancies? Like, what's going on in the depot?
No, ma'am, we're fully staffed in our depot. And if we do have more devices that are broken, we supplement that with desktop support engineers to come in over, such as spring break. They'll all come back to the depot and fix as many devices as we can fix. And we're always scrambling and working on that last minute protocol to try to get them fixed and back out. But when you're working on that small margin of having everything, basically nothing broken, and they're all in our schools, it's hard to have it, because in some locations we may turn over, 30 or 40 Chromebooks come in broken in a week. And you spend that time trying to get those turned around and repaired, and then you have 30 or 40 more the next week, and you're trying to get those back out. So our platform is just trying to get enough spares in the schools, and principals are, if you talk to them, they'll express the same thing. They would like to have more of that insurance in their schools.
So with adding an additional 1,500 devices to our schools, staffing, you're okay. You have enough technicians and staff to continue managing all of these laptops.
We have enough staff to continue to manage them. And if the proposal goes forth with the RFP that's out there right now to upgrade our 6 through 12 Chromebooks at the end of the school year with the capital funds, then that would help us also, because next year we would have newer devices that have less wear and tear on them, more reliability out of them. So yes, and a lease.
Yeah,
So these are a purchase, not a lease?
These are purchase.
Okay, so we're currently leased. We're currently on, but we're going to a lease, so I'm getting ready to ask.
Next year, yes, sir.
With the Chromebooks.
Yes, sir.
So we're trying to get on a strategy here, right? With technology, and to me, this derails the strategy a bit. So now we're going to own these things. They're going to be paperweights in 5 years. What are we going, how does that fit into our strategy?
So what we've done is the devices that have been swapped out, the Lenovo L570s we just gave to our instructional staff, brought back to the board of bids of surplus to get to buy back our older products. So currently they're going to give us back an allocation of money for all of those devices that we have. And we may not even get that. We will not get refunded to that till probably July, get our final bill back, but we will get recoup some kind of expense on that in the end. So with these devices at the end of 5 years, we'll put them up, for a sale and recoup that and try to funnel it back into our technology at some point in the future.
So eventually we're going to go to a whole lease model with the whole Chromebooks and everything.
We are, yes. And slowly we're getting rid of, the items like what Mr. Morale was saying. We're slowly, moving our items that we own out and going to a lease model. But with these 1,500, we thought that it would be better to purchase these as our spares and keep them around for the next 5 years as our spares, and then move everything to a lease model with these.
Once we get back on track with the model,
We're slowly getting back on track to everything and weeding out most of our stuff. This is just a supplemental case where we need extra devices for testing, and we want to keep those around the district for that.
I guess, if we go to a full lease model, can we just add 10% more to the lease?
The lease currently, the RFP lease is for $25,500, and for next year, and that will cover all 6 through 12 students to have another device.
Is there a surplus over the top of that?
We have not.
Backup?
We have not included a surplus.
So that just gets us 1-to-1.
Capital funds gets us 1-to-1. Our surplus will be the devices that are out there now, that are sitting. We will keep a percentage of those back. We own them, so we're going to keep a percentage of those back as a loaner for a day or two. If yours, happens to fail, we would be able to swap you out with something and bring it back and keep that turnaround time at 48 hours.
So I got a challenge before we spend $500,000. Do we have, so we must have had some type of contingency plan for the end of school year 2018 before these funds were found. And it sounds like the need is taken care of as soon as we get beyond this week of testing. So can we survive through there without spending $500,000? That's my challenge to you guys.
I think it just comes down to an acceptable risk. If right now we're close and we're making it, it's just for me, I get uncomfortable when the risk margin gets really small. And my recommendation would be to put them out there to eliminate that risk factor coming in the skin. I'm worried that there won't be enough time for broken devices to turn around and get back to the students in that.
I heard elementary school has a 5th grade science EOG. That's the only thing that's tested on the device. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're
Not on the
regular EEG,
device.
but not on the computer.
Oh, okay.
No, computer.
So I got a challenge. Can we repurpose everything not being utilized for that science test, get through the week of testing, and then we go to our refresh strategy?
You can. It's that scramble and giving somebody a device they may not be familiar with.
They're not going to be familiar with the new device either.
Yeah, just bringing, scrambling to bring one up, get it back to the school, and then get it back to the student and put it back. It's just that acceptable risk of being that close on devices.
We're good though, right?
Yes.
Bottom line is, I don't know if there is, it's a risk. And so, I'm not an expert in technology. That's why I have Jay. And so as our CTO, he's come to us and said, I have a concern about this. I've assessed the current layout of the system, and this is a concern. What do you want to do about it? And you have one of two answers. You do nothing and you see what happens, or we proactively try to get some more computers in here so that we don't have that big of a risk. And that's why this is coming to you.
I would also say that Jay has not even been with us a year yet. So he's been learning our district aggressively since he joined us and to this point. So I'm not surprised that he would come to us with something that he has learned in the past few months. And we haven't been meeting every month either. So this really does not surprise me at all, having served on this committee for 3 years. And Yep.
But likewise, it doesn't surprise me that he wouldn't be aware that testing in elementary school is just 5th grade science, and we could repurpose those for that week and get us on a refreshed strategy. So that's my challenge is, I mean, I see Dr. Jones nodding his head. I mean, it sounds like that could work as a strategy.
So as a strategy to go, like to literally, I guess, go to the 5th grade, they test, grab them all up, go, is that like
No,
to all
there's,
the
so
26 elementary schools?
my understanding is there's other Chromebooks within an elementary school besides 5th grade, correct? So
3 through 5.
And then another factor also is looking at school by school. Schools also sometimes make individual purchases. So that laptop cart that is in the corner, you may have a school that bought several of those carts, and sometimes they would have that surplus as well. So communicating with Dr. Bowers as well as Mr. Parker helps in looking at what their inventory is.
Those are often purchased through the school's PTO. The PTO did a fundraiser, for example, and could have bought that. I know, because I know that's how we did it in my children's elementary school. So it's not necessarily that the laptop cart came through the school's budget. It was that the PTO raised the funds and purchased that cart.
It could be both, depending on the school and the how the principal utilized the funds.
All right, just one more question. So we're going to a lease model next year.
Yes, you're
We're
correct.
going to purchase 1,500 of these.
Yes, sir.
What's the lease price per laptop?
The RFP ends at the end of February.
Okay, and then with the lease, are we looking to replace every 2 years, 4 years,
It's 5 years,
5 years?
5-year lease. So these supplemental laptops that we're buying now will carry us as spares over the next 5 years, plus what we're allocating to our students in a one-to-one environment.
So we currently have an RFP out for a lease.
Yes, sir.
So we could potentially have another vendor with another laptop.
We could, yes, sir. We look at value and price. So you want to look at what is the most reliable, product out there, and we're not, associated with not linked to any one vendor. So we look at the best price and best value for the model that we're collecting, and we'll go through a rubric scoring where we'll bring in staff, students, and our technology to, assess the device and then make the decision.
Yeah, because I see the need for it. I just have a concern if we have another model next year. That's going to be a shock more than anything versus bringing a new system, going from elementary to whatever. Have another brand, and keyboard layout's a little different. Mouse.
Yeah, the keyboard, will be the same, may be different, but the internal components of the way we manage the Google and the streaming and the hardware is, is owned by Google. They manage that part. So that'll be the same as far from a technology's point. It'll just be a different, everything's online. Like you said, there may be with the newest model, just typically like if you buy your home device and you go get another one in 5 years, there may be a few different buttons here and there.
I want to just mention, and please step in and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm just going off memory here, old memory. If I'm not mistaken, part of our fund balance is because we postponed purchasing administrative laptops and devices, and then charter school payments. So part of our fund balance was technology.
I believe
Correct?
it was
1.9 to or 2.1 million.
right at 2 million.
Okay.
Some money left from when we purchased.
So
last
if my memory is correct, part of that fund balance was technology devices, and that's why we have 5.7. Almost half of our fund balance was originally intended for devices. Now it just happened to be teacher devices, and now we've been able to take care of that and get our charter school payments made. But we should never forget that fund balance was technology. Oh, maybe even half of it. Right?
Yeah, I guess my concern is, like I said before, I'd rather have all one model and do it all at one time versus getting $1,500 or $1,500 now than, because 10% we're going to purchase, what, 25,000 you said next year?
It'll be 25,500s in the RFP.
So we
And-
get an additional, get about 27,500.
which will, prepare us and ensure that we won't have impacts in the future for the next 5 years with this.
And then we're leasing. I mean, I prefer
Then
to
we
go
lease,
that route
yes.
with me. I mean, that way it's all,
Mhm.
That's next year.
Yes, ma'am. It's next year's capital funds budget.
yeah. So we're looking at FY 20 to replace?
No, sir, we plan to do that in 18-19. We would order the devices in July. So we would,
In the new budget.
when the new budget cycle's up,
So,
and we would do our best to have them.
You would do a rollout to students just like you did with staff this year.
Correct.
During the fall semester,
So-
you'd roll those
if
out.
we could get by another, through this semester, we would be, one semester we'd be fine, right?
All right, so Jay, if I'm correct, you need a motion for this to go to the board for approval or for the committee to move otherwise?
Yes, ma'am.
Just,
Anybody like to make the motion or alternative motion?
Okay, Jay. I know where you're coming from.
Mhm.
I absolutely appreciate the questions that you have brought. Do you need 1,500 devices to get through the spring semester of testing? Could 750, or is this price based on 1,500 devices? Because I think where we're going with this discussion, it sounds like we're making this $400 million or $400,000 decision on one semester of testing. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, I guess the way I look at it is you have computers that were bought in 2012, 2013. So they're 5 to 6 years old in your middle and high schools.
So we're getting ready to purchase 25,000?
It will come in next year,
For
yes.
next year.
Mhm, for next
Those
year.
will not be in until next fall. So the issue that we have is
Yeah,
this coming fall. So the issue that we have again is, I think Jay's concern and the concern from school-based staff is because you have outdated computers and the backlog in the depot of how long it takes to fix them, when you get to testing, due to the amount of testing that is done online, if you have a kid who can't get a replacement in time, how does that child complete that test? Or what if you have a computer that dies on you? So Jay's concern was we don't have enough backups. This proposal would give you that one semester, but for the next 5 years. I mean, so we're not going to just say we're going to buy them and then we're going to get rid of them. They're going to last us for the next 5 to 6 years.
Right, but wouldn't we want to get a contingency on the refresh strategy? Wouldn't we want to include up the 25,000 by 10%?
Well, I think
And that's our,
I think our contingency are the ones that we have now.
And we can do
yeah,
that.
but they're 2013, so what's?
We can
Well, if we're trying to not get them for the next semester, I mean, we're saying,
we can certainly bump up the number in the RFP from 25 to 27. That's going to help us long term. What he's concerned about is now. That's the net of it. It's a short term, long term issue.
But the next purchase we're making, I would assume that number has a 10% or whatever in there for spares or backup. Because I know we did that for the teacher admin, didn't we? We had a percentage for backup.
We bought 3,200 devices, and that's about the number of staff that we had.
Okay.
And this will replace the 1-to-1 also in 6 through 12.
The contingency that you have right now is because the school system has purchased them and not leased them. We own the devices. So you either keep them and you try to salvage the ones that are still decent and you refresh them, or you surplus them. And so what he's done on the teacher device is said, which of the ones do we have that we can save as contingency and backup for teachers or administrators that we don't need to surplus because they're actually still somewhat decent? The same would be true with the student devices, because you own the student devices. In the future, their staff would identify the current devices that we can save as contingency for backup.
So I think where we are on our decision is do we take care of this need now as a purchase? Or do we roll the dice and gamble that we have enough for the spring and hold off for a lease to include this number? You know, it just depends on what level of risk taker you are. And do we want to do a purchase or hold off and postpone and hope that we make it through testing and do a lease?
Yeah, I personally would like to see us, Dr. Jones, somebody looking into the strategy of, can we repurpose those elementary school Chromebooks for the testing cycle of the 1 week, and then get on the testing strategy. So I guess my recommendation would be, can we go away and have staff look at that as a means to get us through this week of testing, which seems to be the critical concern here, and then come back to the full board with the result of that. And then I don't know if we need a motion pending the result of that. So if yes, then then we deny this request. If no, then we proceed.
The answer is yes. I mean, staff can go back and can take a look at that. I guess my argument would be, if you have third, fourth, and fifth graders taking the EOG, and I don't have the testing calendar in front of me. If you have third, fourth, and fifth graders taking your EOG the first week in May, and let's say that your EOCs in high schools and EOGs in middle schools would be the following week or 2 weeks later. Is there enough time between when those fifth graders take their science test and when the high school and middle school kids take their end of grade test for staff to go in, collect the number of devices they need from elementary schools, refurbish them, do what needs to happen on the technical end to get them ready for middle school and high school testing, deliver them to the middle school and high school, get them powered up? That process that doesn't happen overnight. So we can go back and research it. My fear would be, and it's the board's decision, obviously, delaying this another month in terms of the purchase, while you get then the computers in time before the testing. If we don't come back to you with a recommendation until May, or I'm sorry, until April.
It's a week delay, right? I mean, our board meeting is.
Sure. Or we can bring it back to the full board or to you all before the next board meeting if we need to.
Well, one question real fast. With the elementary laptops, if they get brought up to high school, is that just a login and all the content gets brought down?
It is correct. It's a login. Typically on those, we wipe the machines overnight, like what Dr. Houlihan was saying. We prepare those for testing. We bring them up, we wipe them, we put them back on the networks. So when students log in, that there's no impacts to updates or anything that they need for the NC test apps refreshed on there too.
Okay.
So it's what he's indicating is correct. It's a process of shuffling devices and taking them up, and you're taking them out of the hands of the fifth grade students when you do move those. They don't have access to those for instruction now because we came in and swept them and took them up to the next level.
From the time you place the order for 1,500 devices, what is the turnaround to receive the devices and have them delivered to the schools and the classrooms? Like, how many weeks does that take your team to get those 1,500 devices from purchase to the schools?
It's anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. It takes 3 weeks to get here from the vendor. Once we place the order, they ship those to us. And then it takes us time. We have to put the asset tag them, and we actually take them out of the boxes. We go ahead and image them, wipe them, clean them, and then we put them back and allocate them to the schools. So it's a process on our side that takes a few weeks to do it. So our timing is to get them in, get them prepared, and get them back out to the schools, because not only they're here, they have to be transported and put back in schools.
Okay.
Again, if you all want to meet before the next board meeting and we can go back and do some research, then we're happy to do that.
That's what I would like. I don't know if we need a motion for that, or if we can ask that you do a little bit of due diligence and come back to us with, is it possible to basically deflect this purchase, find out a strategy to get us through testing week, and then what does that rollout look like? So it sounds like it's going to be a mid-fall rollout of the new devices. Can we survive through that too without these purchases? So I think it's twofold. It's testing and then
fall semester,
forecasting the beginning of fall semester with whatever our normal fallout of devices looks like from year to year.
Yes, I mean, we can come back and again, I would just ask the committee if you all would convene before the March board meeting. You know, if we wanted, that's
do that.
2 weeks from now. We can go back and do that, in terms of research. I don't think you need
a week for that, or?
We could,
We're not meeting in a week.
No, what I'm saying is,
Yeah,
do
we
you think
could-
you need
we
about a
could
week to
meet-
turn that around, and we can have a quick follow-up?
We could meet like 30 minutes prior to the March 6th board meeting. We could get together at 5:30 or
We'll
so.
get a phone call if we need to.
But
we
yeah,
can-
even a
we can
conference
do it.
call.
we can have the further diligence done within a week. And if the committee would be willing to meet even by conference call, we can email you the materials ahead of time and just talk through it and go from there.
I think that's our best strategy, if you wouldn't mind that.
I don't think we need a motion. I think we just say at this current time, we're going to continue to do research and we'll bring back the recommendation or a change in recommendation in a week.
So the only thing I ask while you're doing that is, when you come back to us with this information, just think about the lease agreement we're about to enter into
Yes, ma'am.
and what that price could be for 15 or 750 devices, whatever. And just, let us know in a week or two, do you need the 1,500 with knowing that we're getting ready to enter into a lease agreement? And do you anticipate
Factors into consideration.
So we'll table that until we hear, get some more information. And
The only thing I wanted to add was these are the details from that original sheet this morning.
Okay.
thank you, Jeff.
And, Mr. Parker, I want to thank you for all this information. If we're at 5%, with our devices to allocate, in these situations, I definitely I think we all understand 5% is not enough.
It's not.
Okay. So thank you very much.
Mr. Helms, I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
A second?
All right, all those in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
I just